listener production.
The creators of this podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which it is recorded. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the first storytellers of this land. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Indigenous people who may be listening today.
Hello and welcome to FOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen, and my guest this week is one half, perhaps the better half of the Weekly Planet, Nick Maso Mason.
Hello.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I honestly consider myself about 1/3 of our two-man podcast, but it's nice. It's nice of you to say some lies up top to get some listeners in. I appreciate that.
It feels like every podcast kind of duo, there tends to be one person who does more work than the other.
Yes.
You know, like you are James's equivalent of Will. Like you like to come in at the last minute and just crack wise over all his hard work.
I think I saw a tweet some months ago, and it was something along the lines of someone was saying, I think the job they want is there's two people in a podcast, and the one you want to be is not the one that does all the work, but the one that just reacts to the other guy. And I got tagged in that at least 100 times as the guy that doesn't do anything and just shows up and goes, sounds dumb, And I'm thinking, I should probably get into contact with Will then, and we could form some sort of union, I think.
Yeah, it's like
obviously
that,
I'm not going to do the paperwork on that, but
it's like that joke on The Simpsons when Lisa goes to see the band. It's all the second half of the famous duos, like Oates,
it's a Garfunkel and Oates situation. Yeah.
I had that experience. I got to be the Maso when Osh and I started doing Dad Pod, and Osh is like super diligent and really prepared. And not only would he come in with ideas to the show, but then he would message you to say, "Hey, I've got a new idea for the next season. Why don't we do this, that, and the other? And we'll bring in these experts." And I'd just sit back sipping like my pina colada and be like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I'll just rock up at 4 p.m. when we record and just crack wise over all your hard work."
Yes, it's a sliding scale, isn't it? It's a spectrum, if you will.
Yeah.
And yeah, Osher seems like a guy who would be just absolutely like he's on the ball. He's at the peak, I think.
He's a pro. He's an actual showbiz professional, not just a dude who cobbles together a fake radio show in his hotel room. But mate, so there is a specific reason why I asked you to come back on the show. And it's a topic that is a frequent favourite of Will and I. And I've listened to enough episodes of the Weekly Planet to know that you and James have firm opinions about this.
Oh, yes.
It is the career of Dwayne The Rock Johnson, which at this current point seems to be poised at a very, he's been on an upward trajectory pretty much like, his whole professional career, don't you think? But it feels like now there is a bit of mud that is starting to stick, perhaps for the first time ever.
Now, first of all, I just wanted to. I actually had a conversation a couple of days ago with mutual friend Claire Tonti, who's been on this podcast before, and she was saying, "Oh, when I go on Charlie's podcast, we're always talking about, we're having deep conversations about parenthood and growing up and some deep, meaningful conversations." And she's like, "What are you guys going to be talking about?" And I'm like, "The Rock, movie superstar, The Rock."
Well, look, it's horses for courses. We can talk about parenting if you want, but Claire is she's just my unofficial therapist. I don't have to pay her $200 an hour to listen to my problems as a therapist.
Terrific.
That's what I'm using her for.
But I'm very happy to talk about The Rock. Yeah, he's a fascinating figure, I think. And I think, look, he's also so far beyond our comprehensions of fame and superstardom that even if this was like a really brutal attempt at a takedown, he wouldn't even feel it. He wouldn't even notice it. So I feel like we're allowed.
Not at all. And I love The Rock. I was literally at dinner last night discussing The Rock and saying, I still think he's a phenomenon and he's great, but I am fascinated by what makes him tick and the obvious career choices he's made and all these kind of things. Because every aspect of his career seems very kind of well thought out and strategized. And
yes,
I'm thinking in particular, I don't know if you've caught much of the young Rock,
Not at all. Not a single moment.
Okay. I watched every episode.
Of course. Okay, great.
And it is such a fascinating, I think that it's a very telling kind of vanity project. And, I don't think vanity project in that, like it's a bad thing necessarily, but it's a show about his life. And as a fan of wrestling, particularly like the 80s era and attitude era of wrestling, it's fun to kind of see, actors dressing up as all these kind of wrestlers that I grew up with. But what is more intriguing about it is the premise of the entire series from series 1 is that it's the future, like the near future, and Dwayne The Rock Johnson is running for president. And so...
Oh, my goodness. All right.
So he's being interviewed by a journalist who's sort of like, following him on the campaign trail to kind of give people an idea of who their potential president would be. And so that is the conceit with which they do all these flashbacks. So it basically flashes back to when he was 8 years old, when he was 15, when he was like 21, starting out as a wrestler. And so you get a lot of these kind of like this homespun wisdom. And the thing about The Rock that I always find most kind of like fascinating is for a guy who kind of, he built his wrestling persona off being The Rock, which is this kind of like arrogant, strutting, kind of cocky dude. And even a lot of his film roles, he plays kind of like a lovable rogue. But then as Dwayne Johnson, the person, he's incredibly earnest. Like if you look at his social media, he does these like 1 minute, just like soliloquies about like the benefits of hard work and never giving up, and it's 2 a.m. and I've got to squeeze in a workout and all this kind of shit, right? So
yeah. And if you could be born 6'5", that would probably help as well. But also the hard work thing is also good.
There is this mix of sort of like, humility in a way where he sort of talks about, that he came from nothing and that he had to work his way up and he made mistakes and blah, blah, blah. That humility works really well when you turn out to be a gigantic movie star, possibly one of the most famous
for sure.
men on the planet. But in this series, so I think it's like halfway through the first series, so he's doing this campaign trail and he's telling all these stories to the past. And Rosario Dawson comes on as like his choice for VP, playing a character, not as Rosario Dawson, as a character.
Oh, okay, right.
And the very end of the episode, it's just like a still frame, and The Rock walks directly up to camera and just delivers this kind of 1 minute speech to camera about where America's headed, what it's needed to, what it needs to come together and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, it's like, this message is endorsed by Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And I'm like, he's beta testing an actual presidential run. That's what he's doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be I guess once you've conquered the box office, once you've become super rich and super beloved and one of the most ripped men who ever lives, what's left, especially in America, and the central tenet of America is you work hard enough, you could be anything, and you could be the president. That's what we're all sold. So is it just this one episode where he gives a kind of monologue to camera at the end?
Well, I think my conspiracy brain goes further, right? So, and spoilers for anyone who's planning to get into Young Rock. But so the first season ends with him not actually winning the election. So then the second season is all about him kind of trying to regroup and to deal with failure. And throughout that, what I think that the Rock's team are doing is they're sort of testing out kind of strategies. Like, okay, so how will this episode rate if The Rock says this? Or how will it rate if his approach is this? And so it's almost like they're wargaming a genuine presidential run. And I think it's all through this kind of, like through role playing, like work role plays where they'll bring in, someone to play a manager and someone to play a customer. You can work out how the scenario might play out. That's what I think is going on with this series.
I mean, you could be right. I mean, there's probably, episodes where as his character, he gives various opinions on, I don't know, healthcare or but in the ring, he's doing it in the ring, Yeah, that's right. He's invented a wrestler from his WWE days who's called like Medicare for All, whatever, and then he thumps him in the ring. And then we as the audience decide whether we like that or not. I think you could be right. I mean, to some degree, everything he does, I think, even those those very earnest, Instagram posts about believing in yourself and working hard, how much of that is real? How much of that does he actually believe? Or is he, does his team say, listen, you got to do a motivational post today. You've got to, remember to get one in, because people like those. Yeah. That's a guaranteed million likes.
Well, Will got a personal, not a personal message, but a reply from The Rock. I think it was last year or maybe the year before. So Adam Spencer tweeted out a photo of him and Will and The Rock when The Rock was out here in the early 2000s promoting his book or something, and said something like, hey, The Rock, it's Will's birthday. It'd be great to get a shout out. And he responded. And so we talked about on the show and how cool that was. But then Will's like, but I don't think that was him. Like, I think he has a team of, social media. Yeah. And I sort of that makes sense. That's probably the most logical thing. But there's also part of me that could see The Rock, the enormous Rock, sitting up late at night, there's just gigantic boulder-like shoulders with a tiny little phone looking like a postage stamp in his hand, just taking replies to his Twitter account.
He's there, he's sweating, he's like, oh my God, I got to say the perfect message to this guy. I want him to make him feel seen. This Will Anderson character, whoever he is.
But it's not just Will, I've seen other kind of replies that he's done. Like someone posted a, what do you call it? An audio recording where he had texted The Rock to say, hey, that what's that song that he did? Face Off? He did a rap song with a bunch of rappers. I think it's called Face Off. Uh-huh. And this dude texted The Rock to say, hey, man, that track is fire. And then he got a reply, which was a voice recording from The Rock, where The Rock does his verse from the song. And it sounds like it's The Rock. And I'm like, well, if he has a social media team, maybe they have the AI that completely can, or, and I think this is more likely, The Rock actually decided to leave this guy a voicemail message.
Maybe. Look, I would love that to be true, but I think at this point all conspiracies are on the table. I love to believe that there's an AI they're using to replicate his voice for messages. I'm liking the idea that perhaps there's a whole social media team and they all reply to different categories of tweets. Like if somebody wants a birthday shout out, there's a birthday guy who tweets happy birthday in the style of The Rock. Or if there's a kid in hospital, there's a get well soon slugger guy. They're all separate guys. He probably gets so many tweets that it's just we need a new guy for every one of these.
Well, what he's clearly very good at is basically with the show, The Young Rock, and all these kind of tweets and social media presence, is he's creating his own mythology, right? So he's kind of redefining his history, the narrative of his past by putting this show out. Then there's a social media post which is all about these are my beliefs. To what end? Who knows? Maybe he's content just being the biggest movie star in the world and he doesn't want to actually run for office or anything like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But no one stays famous forever. The fact that Tom Cruise is still a movie star is incredible, but even Tom Cruise, had a real dip in the kind of mid 2000s, the whole sort of Katie Holmes couch jumping era.
Not even me, Charlie, a podcaster. I'm not going to stay famous forever.
No, I've got some bad news for you. Podcast fame is the most fragile of all levels of fame.
That is true. That is very true. So I guess, what's his next step? But I don't know.
His next step appeared to be that he was going to remold the DC universe around himself. And this is sort of, where I think your expertise and your analysis of recent
events here we go.
will be handy. So, and, the people who aren't aware of what went down and what's come to light recently. And Maso, feel free to kind of chime in if I'm getting any of this wrong.
Please. I would love to.
So The Rock had this passion project, Black Adam. And Black Adam is traditionally a villain of Shazam, a superhero whose magic power is his little boy who can turn into a godlike man. Is that right?
A big man. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
You've got the gist of it. It's little boy becomes big man.
And so The Rock had been developing this project for 15-something years. It was his passion project. I guess it's every star has their passion project. It's like Kevin Costner and his Dances with Wolves or whatever it is. And this was The Rock's. And so he developed it to a point where the DC universe had already started, and there's the Snyderverse, all that kind of stuff is happening.
Baby steps. It's only been 10-ish years, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
The DC universe as a whole, they're nearly there. They nearly have a universe. And I think they should be proud of what they've built.
Yeah, okay, so I should say there was an attempt to start the universe, but there was a universe existing that was faltering. You know, some films were well received, most were not. So The Rock comes in with his entry into the superhero genre.
Yes.
Now, logically, and the way Marvel have built their universe is they've been quite, they adhered to the legacy and history of the comics quite closely. So, the villain of the hero was introduced as the villain of the hero. But The Rock decided to jump Black Adam up a level and say he can't go up against Shazam, which is a B-level superhero and only like a middling. It was a successful film, but it wasn't like, the Batman or anything like that. So
if you've listened to this podcast to this point so far and you don't recognize any of the characters in this, you're not alone. Nobody really knows who Shazam is. Kind of Black Adam, are you kidding me?
Which is kind of the point. And that obviously that's what The Rock and his team saw as well, is like, are we really going to be middling around with these characters that no one knows? Or do we go straight to the top and we pitch him as the villain to Superman? And thus was born the clunkiest teaser catchphrase in history. The hierarchy of power in the DC universe.
Power in the DC universe is going to change. That's right. Say it together with us, folks.
Oh, boy, oh, boy.
For people who are not super aware of the history of comic books being converted to movies, that's not the most far out idea of taking a kind of a B-list character and turning him into an A-list character. And I think part of The Rock's plan was probably, a la the Fast and the Furious, is you get a character who starts out as a bad guy or an anti-hero, and then they have a change of ways, and then, they become a hero in their own right, and then he would become, a Superman stature hero. And that, again, the everybody, the Avengers movies were so profoundly popular. They're, staggeringly popular. But the reason that particular lineup of superheroes exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is because all the the quote unquote good characters in the Marvel's in Marvel's comic books had already been used. A lot of people are like, oh my God, well, of course, Iron Man's always been popular, but he wasn't really. Like, what, the reason Spider-Man wasn't in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for 10 plus years is because Marvel licensed that character out to Sony in a extraordinarily bad deal, which means Sony basically owns that character forever in the movies. The same with, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and Blade and all these characters that they just gave away for a song. If I remember correctly, Blade, the Blade franchise, made hundreds of millions of dollars, and Marvel gave that character away for $65,000. That's all they got, like ever. And so when it came to building their own cinematic universe, Marvel said, who do we have left? Well, we've got Captain America, we've got Iron Man, we've got Thor, Hawkeye, the sort of the Hulk kind of, and they made that work. And Iron Man changed from a character that people were like, is this guy a robot? I don't know. I've seen him, but I'm not sure, kind of thing. And they got the charisma of Robert Downey Jr. and they turned it into, a multi-billion-dollar franchise. So to get back to your original point, the idea that you could get a Black Adam who nobody, who's in some Shazam books, and you're like, what's this guy's deal? I'm not sure. And turn him into the biggest superhero in the world, the most recognizable face in the world. It's not common, but it's not that far-fetched, If you've got enough charisma behind it, you've got enough marketing behind it, you put a good movie behind it, it can work. But it didn't.
It feels like the whole time with DC, they tried to cheat. They tried to just like skip a level. Like the Marvel build-up was very patient. Like it kind of had to be, because they literally had to invest in a character and maybe create more depth and nuance that wasn't there because of the name recognition wasn't there. So they had to sort of create an image of, like, I don't know how many people prior to Robert Downey Jr. would have been able to describe the characteristics of Tony Stark. But now, billionaire playboy philanthropist, that just rolls off the tongue. But whereas DC were like, oh, okay, so rather than this patient build where we introduce all these characters separately and give them clearly defined powers and interests and flaws, and then slowly bring them together in an interesting mix, we'll just put everyone together and just like rely on brand recognition to get us across the line. And so,
yes, absolutely.
it was funny, like, because I still haven't seen Black Adam. I know that you didn't mind it, and James quite hated it. Is that right?
Uh-huh. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yes. Look, and again, a lot of these movies, I think, for me especially, it depends on the day. Sometimes I'm in the mood for a formulaic action movie that hits all the beats you expect it to hit, and it's this character, and he emerges from his millennia-long slumber, and he learns about this modern world, and he's tough and stoic, but then he's got a vulnerability in his heart, and he meets a little kid who reminds him of his own kid, and blah blah, and then he finds the real injustice and he destroys it, and maybe he's having a turn for the better, but also he was here all along, blah blah blah. That's sometimes I'm just in the mood for that, and it's a bit of fun, and it reminds me of reading a comic book when I was a kid, and you just pick up a random comic book and go, that was pretty fun, kind of thing. But also, you're spending $200 million to make one of these. Maybe the audience should go in there and say more than, yeah, that was kind of fun, I guess. I don't know. It was fine.
I think it also depends on your expectations. Like, you obviously, the bad press around Black Adam was quite widespread, right? Although Black Adam could be a really good film. I sort of felt the same way about the last Thor. Like, I'd heard so many bad things about it, but then when I watched it, and I did a classic thing of watching it on the plane, where I was distracted and eating peanuts and go to the bathroom and stuff. But I was like, this is a fun, silly bit of like color and movement. I can't remember any scene from it. Like, I don't actually I couldn't tell you. There's a giant goat, I think a screaming goat or something, or is that another?
There's two giant goats. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a disservice to the visual effects team who built two more or less identical giant goats, Charlie. Please remember both the giant goats.
Yeah,
but look, and also Thor: Love and Thunder, I think especially, is probably perfect on a plane movie fodder. Feels a little bit like a sitcom. You're at 40,000 feet and your brain isn't working properly, and you just want color and movement, and that provides it. And you know what? If the plane lands before you can watch the whole thing, doesn't really matter. It's probably fine.
Yeah. So the thing about The Rock, coming into this universe, and he obviously had designs. It wasn't going to be a soft launch. It was going to be $200 million movie with a $200 million marketing budget, maybe even more, because it felt like it was everywhere. And he was going to launch this character into the public consciousness. And he applied the same level of dedication and grind to his publicizing of this film that he does to everything else. Like, it was all he talked about, it felt like, for 4 years. Like, I remember seeing him at, what's that DC thing that they do, the DC...
Oh, Fandom.
Yeah, Fandom. I remember him showing like concept art at that like 5 years ago or something like that. And like, I think that's even when he first tried out the sort of hierarchy of power thing he was going to change.
Yeah. So, this has been a long game for him.
But the thing that, I just find so puzzling about all of it is, like, I understand having a passion project but genuinely, like, like a Hudson Hawk or a Heaven's Gate or any of these kind of, famous bombs that are passion projects. It's generally someone attempting something ambitious or out of their wheelhouse or just something different, and it fails because, we just like to see you as Indiana Jones, or we just like to see you as a cowboy, or we just like to see, whatever it is. But The Rock, his big swing and a miss was the safest, most established genre. And so, because he kept coming out in all the press saying, we're changing the superhero genre. Like, you'll believe a hero could be bad and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, I've seen the trailers, and I'm pretty sure he's a good guy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who has some bad traits.
Yeah, I wonder if his team gave him some bad information and he rolled with that for years, because so much of the trailers, you're right, sort of lent into like, hey, heroes don't kill people. Oh, but I do. And it's like, yeah, like in the 60s, superheroes didn't kill people, but they're just, you see an Avengers movie? They're throwing people off buildings. They're chopping heads off. They're all murderers. And they're rich, so they're going to get away with it. So, like, the idea that this is a new breed of superhero, make him a hero that doesn't kill people. That would be, he takes a vow or something. Yeah. Turn it around on us.
And it seemed like the formula of the script was a character would tell Black Adam he was something, and he would just be really contrarian about it. So it'd be like, heroes don't kill, but I do. You will yield and kneel. I don't kneel and I don't yield. It's like, is that the bulk of the dialogue of him just like contradicting every statement that's put towards him?
Yeah, kinda. And look, and again, I also wonder if they maybe were just like, The Rock's charisma will push this forward. You know, and I often think that there's at least two different kinds of action heroes, like big styles of action heroes. But I think that the two that people that they vibe with the most. Speaking of Die Hard, there's a character like a John McClane who just sort of struggles through every scene he gets through by the skin of his teeth, and we're there with him, and every time they succeed, and or in Indiana Jones, every time they roll under the gate before it closes, we're like, yes, he's done it, but will he make it next time, kind of thing. And I think Die Hard was a perfect example of pushing against the previous action movie trope that people loved, which is just like a steamroller of a character, like
Commando or Rambo,
like a Commando, exactly, a Stallone or a Schwarzenegger or something like that, where they take a little while to pick up steam, but then it's just them chewing through an army of bad guys, and we love that because we know they're bad guys, and it's just a satisfying feeling for them to crush through. And I don't know about you, but I've always identified more with the John McClanes. But I think there's a huge market for the Rock kind of character who never loses. He never loses a fight. It's in his contract now that he never loses a fight. But to me, that's not compelling. And I don't know. I think there are some people who have watched the Rock's career rise, and there was a sort of a pathway in a wood, and he could have gone one way or the other. And because there are some of his early works where he is more of a McClane kind of character. He is willing to take some hits, and there's ones where he is kind of a steamroller. And which directions is he going to commit to for the rest of his career? And he's gone with the steamroller. And I think there are some people who are like, oh, I thought he would. I liked a big physical character who's got some more vulnerability, and he doesn't show that anymore, and it's just not interesting.
Well, action as a genre is really interesting because, like, we all know it's fake. It's like wrestling, the results are predetermined. Scott Adkins, he has a great YouTube channel where he sort of talks about action and deconstructs actions, and has action stars and stuntmen on to talk about, like, how to create good action. And he was sort of saying that, like, it's a film like The Expendables, for instance, where you have all these legends. He said, like, everyone's there, they want to do a good job and they want to work, but they're all acutely aware that they have their own fan bases, and everyone's own fan base. They want to see, Van Damme do the splits. They want to see Dolph Lundgren be huge. They want to see Jason Statham say something cool in a Cockney accent and, like, do a spin kick it. And so he said, like, it's actually, you got to keep action simple, because the more of that stuff you bring into it, and it's not that the stars are being dicks about it. They're just protecting their brand. Like, this is their base. And
right,
I think and that's kind of, you've heard stories about, I think it was the Fast and the Furious, where there's like contractual obligations about how many fights, who wins the fight, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is
so antithetical to the creative process. But, I guess it is their brand.
Yeah, there's a moment, I can't remember which Fast and Furious movie it is. It could be 6, but it is where it was revealed that contractually, the both of those, Vin Diesel and The Rock, as part of their contracts, they couldn't, if they were in a physical fight, a fake fight, they could only win or draw. They could never lose, and so there are, like, once you learn that, all the cracks start to form. Especially, there's literally a moment where the two characters are in a fight. I think it's in 6, and literally the ground splits open.
Yeah,
there's some sort of earthquake, and they are physically separated, because there's no way that the writers could have written out one of them winning or losing. So they instead had to destroy the Earth itself, and it's not compelling, I
remember watching the DVD to 12 Monkeys. It's a really fascinating making of documentary on the DVD. Maybe it's on the Blu-ray as well. And the whole time, like Terry Gilliam is incredibly wary of hiring and working with Bruce Willis. He's like, I'm not an action guy. This is not an action film. Like, we're bringing in this Die Hard. People are going to think it's a film. It's a different kind of film. But he obviously has to do it, let the studio get the final say. And there's a lot of these kind of moments throughout the documentary where he's working with Bruce, and you can just sort of see this kind of tension, this sort of battle of wills. And there's this one scene in particular where Bruce Willis has kidnapped Madeline Stowe, put her in the boot. And in the scene, like, he opens the boot, she kicks him in the guts or hits him with a petrol can and runs off. And so they're blocking the scene and rehearsing. And Bruce is like, there's no way she could kick me and knock me over. There's absolutely nothing she could do to knock me over. And Terry Gilliam's like, well, what if she, picks up this, like, the crowbar and hits you? And Bruce is like, I'd grab it. And so Terry Gilliam's like, well, what about if she shoves, like, the petrol canister into your chest and kicks you in the shins? No, that wouldn't be enough. And to just see Terry Gilliam going like, okay, Bruce, I get that you wouldn't lose a fight to Madeline Stowe, but we have to get to the next scene. So how are we going to make that happen? Like, how are we going to get her out of the boot and into the next scene? But it's just, on one hand, I can sort of see where Bruce Willis is coming from. Yeah, like, he wanted to make sense. But on the other hand, the story's got to happen, Bruce.
Yeah. No, I would simply defeat her in single combat. Actor Madeline Stowe. I would simply do that. But also, hey, Bruce, how about, like, some people make mistakes sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Another interview I remember reading. So, like, Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll call them the Planet Hollywood trio.
I love those guys.
When Expendables first came out, Sly did a series of Q&As on Ain't It Cool, where people would submit questions and they would sort of post the top 10 or whatever. And someone said to him, so it would have been like the mid-2000s, right, when the first Expendables came out, or late 2000s. And Stallone was like, action films are just terrible these days. Like, why aren't they as good as they were in the 80s? And Sly had this theory. He said, I remember when I went and saw Tim Burton's Batman, and I'd heard that Michael Keaton had been cast. I was like, Michael Keaton is like 5'10", skinny little, like, comedian. Like, how's he going to be Batman? And then I see him walk out in this rubber suit that's just covered in muscles. And he's like, oh, shit. Like, we're all in trouble now. All these, like, actors who have been spending hours and hours at the gym, like, our days are numbered. And in a lot of ways, he was kind of right, because you sort of look at the evolution of action through the 90s. Keanu Reeves became an action hero, Point Break, Speed, even like The Matrix, and he's not like your typical He-Man. But, now there seems to be sort of with The Rock, a move back towards that more sort of like traditional 80s, like pumped up, muscular action
simpler
film
times,
star.
I think it is. Simple times, simple solutions. And I think that's one of the reasons superhero movies have played so well. First of all, it's like, the stuff we remember as kids, obviously, but also because superheroes have simple solutions to what in the real world are very complicated problems. There's a dictator over in a Middle Eastern nation. We'll just send Iron Man in and he'll laser everybody's heads off or whatever, and it's fine. And he gets away with it because he's rich. But
That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I think so.
So The Rock finds himself now at this point in his career, and by the way, like, The Rock's going to be fine for cash. Let's just sort of,
that's true.
Make a big call. Like, I cannot believe how hard that dude works. Like, not only does he have his, like, film career, but he's just started his own football league. He was hosting like it's a knockout style athletics show. Titans, what was it called? Like Battle of the Titans or Titan something or whatever. But he would host it. He would act in TV on Ballers and stuff. Like, the dude. So often you'd be like, well, he can just sit back and relax and take a holiday. But no, like, he seems determined in doing all these things. But this is probably the first time, like, there's been backlash. Like, so Zachary Levi, who was the star of Shazam, and seems like a what's the word? He's a man
colourful character.
A colourful character, yeah. Not a criminal underworld character, but he has a lot of opinions, interesting opinions.
Yes.
And he decided to come out and say that, The Rock basically interfered with the making of Shazam. Like, there was meant to be a cameo that he kiboshed. There was meant to be a Justice Society ending or whatever that was meant to set up the next films, but The Rock kiboshed it because he wanted the next film to be The Rock versus Superman. Do you think this at all damages his reputation or makes people think differently about it?
I mean, I think there's probably two sets of fans. The ones that pay attention to this sort of social media chatter and those who just love the movies. And I think for the ones, the latter group, I think they're probably just like, whether they like the last movie or not, they're just like, I still love The Rock. Whether this movie wasn't good, but that's probably not his fault, and I'll just watch him in whatever. I'll watch him in Young Rock. I'll watch him in Ballers. I'll watch him in his next thing. There aren't his next few projects. There's not going to be any surprises, and I'll just happy to watch that. But I think for people who love that Hollywood gossip, as you know that I do, it has tarnished his appearance, I think. But for me, I think Look, I would say also as a fan of The Rock generally, he's got a lot of charisma. He's been in a lot of movies that I like. Even I've liked a lot of movies that he's been in that other people think are garbage, like Black Adam. But for me, the decline of The Rock for me is he's in a position where he could literally be in any project he wants. He could be in any type of movie. He could bring in up-and-coming directors and writers and up-and-coming stars and produce something that is really interesting and original. He's got the money, he's got the time, he's got the drive, but he isn't doing any of that sort of thing. And I think one of the reasons that maybe this has been brought into such contrast is because we have another former wrestler in the Hollywood machine currently in the form of Dave Bautista, who is, he's also successful and doing well, but he doesn't want to be a movie star necessarily. He just wants to act, and he wants to be in projects that are interesting to him and let him spread his wings as an actor and take some chances. And people are seeing that. They're seeing him in, Blade Runner 2049 and the Knives Out sequel and all this interesting stuff, and going, and Knock at the Cabin, and going, this guy's making some moves and doing some interesting things. And he was a wrestler. So, but The Rock just seems to be on this, it feels like he's on this treadmill that he can't get off, that he's just like, I've got to just keep making the biggest thing over and over again. That's my measure of success. But again, he's so charismatic. And I just recently watched Fast 5, which is the first appearance of his character, Luke Hobbs, in the Fast franchise. And he's great in that. He's so charismatic, and the back and forth between him and Vin Diesel it's bordering on them not liking each other in real life, but it's a really good sense of there's some real chemistry there, and he's good at that. And I would love him to transfer that in a project that is good and interesting. But it's just like, what if he was a guy? What if he was a guy who was big and tough, and he said big and tough guy stuff, and that's cool.
I mean, I think you guys brought it up on the Weekly Planet. I think it was maybe the Black Adam episode where you were saying that it's crazy how risk-adverse he is. Like, he must be the most risk-adverse star. And generally what happens with, like you say, with stars is even Tom Cruise gets to a level of success, and then it's like, okay, now I want to work with this guy who's still on Sundance. I want to, go work with Paul Thomas Anderson or whatever it is. But he, like you say, is on this treadmill, which is like, if it's not a blockbuster project, it's not worth doing. So then you sort of got to start wondering, well, what is it? It can't all be financial. I mean, he has more money than he'll ever be able to spend in a lifetime. But what is it? Like, I mean, and if you were to take The Rock at his word, he always talks about it's the fans, I'm in service to the fans. I give the fans what they want. But clearly, they didn't want that. Yeah. And also, the Hollywood thing often is all, a lot of movie stars go, okay, there's one for them and one for me. And they're often referring to, okay, there's one for the movie studios where it's the big blockbuster and it makes them a lot of money and they're happy. And then it's one for me. I'll do something that's interesting to me. Surely he could apply that to the fandom. He could say, well, there's one for you guys. And here's something I'm interested in and come with me on that journey. He's got enough charisma to be like, I think at least, to be like,
he could do 2 or 3 years of press on a thing and just say, I'm making a thing and here's the behind the scenes and I brought in these people and I'm going on a journey. You could come on a journey with me and broaden his horizons and broaden their horizons kind of thing. I wonder if maybe he's got, what I often consider to be billionaire's disease. I know he's not a billionaire, but he could be. Maybe he is. I don't know. But where it's just the money. It's just the number in the account. You know what I mean? He's got to be... where it's lost all meaning, but it's a pathology now, and it's in his brain, and he's just got to. The numbers got to keep going up, and it's got to be more than anybody else's money, And if he doesn't do that, it's his brain's decided it's a failure now,
It's like that character from Silicon Valley, the investor who is obsessed with being a billionaire. He gets really depressed because he loses a zero. He's only worth 900 million.
Yes, exactly. That's
it's
exactly
the most devastating news he's ever encountered.
Yeah. There's nothing The Rock couldn't do. There's nowhere he can't go. There's no, if he put the feelers out and he's like, I want to be in a Wes Anderson movie, maybe,
Well, he kind of
maybe
was
Wes
doing
Anderson's
that.
got a spot for him.
He was sort of doing that early on with like Southland Tales and
Southland Tales, yeah.
Because he's a really accomplished comedic performer. Like I think even if you look at the Jumanji films, like he's very funny, got natural. More so than Chris Hemsworth clearly is desperate to do comedy, but I don't think he's very good at it. Like he surrounds himself with funny people, but I think The Rock
That sounds to me like a classic case of Australian tall poppy syndrome, Charlie. Let's bring him down. I could think he's quite funny as Thor and other things that I can't recall.
I don't think he's bad at it. I just think his obvious love of it does not match what he's good at. I think that Chris Hemsworth is a movie star and good at certain things, but I think that I can't think of a scene that he steals or he wins on charisma, and just sheer movie star power. But I don't think if I've gone, that scene had me slapping my thigh. Whereas you can sort of think of like The Rock every time he's guested SNL or, and he's amazing, be cool. But he obviously got to a point where he's like, was there anything more unbecoming than, when the first couple of weeks of Black Adam, the box office receipts were coming in, and people were like, "Oh, this is a bomb," and he releases a video recorded in his car where he's I was just on the phone to my accountant, and we're in the red, baby, or the black, whatever the good thing is. That's us. Don't worry about it. The storm's doing super good, and this is The Rock. And
once you factor in all those VHS sales, we are gonna be sitting pretty on a big pile of cash. Don't even worry about it. We've projected out for the next 45 years, and we're gonna be doing all right, I think.
It was just so strange that, if he does have a media team or if he does have like a social media strategy, like whose idea was it to do that? Because the numbers don't lie. Like who are you kidding? You know what I mean? Like there's a bit of that Trump kind of thing going on where it's like, well, I'll just deny it. I'll just say, it's green when it's blue. But we can all go to Box Office Mojo. We could all see, and to what end? You know what I mean? Like you need this to make $500 million, $600 million for it to break even or be considered a success or whatever.
And even these days, that's not considered a particularly big hit. Like the people want to see that Avengers Endgame money. They want us to see it $1 billion or what have you. Like even if it did make its money back, but as somebody who's, he's the biggest star and he's pushed this so hard for so long, anything under $1 billion, people would be like, embarrassing, very embarrassing, The Rock.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the treadmill that you're talking about before. Like, he's kind of at like an elite level of success where everything he does turns to gold. Like, he's just used to sort of this level of success. So, a break even is considered a failure or a what do you call it? Like an ambitious failure, like a misfire would be. Can you? I can hear an ice cream truck in my hotel room, but I'm pretty sure there isn't.
Oh, wow.
One. Maybe it's The Rock. Maybe I'm being monitored. Oh, it's the loudest ice cream truck.
That's his street team. He's got a lot of volunteers in every corner of the world that they'll track you down. You gotten doxed. They've seen the picture in your hotel room behind you, and they've figured out what hotel you're at.
What room I'm in.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, I just think because I'm really fascinated to see. Like, I'm sure there's like a Jumanji sequel or whatever is coming up next, another Disney kind of property or whatever. But I wonder if there is a point where he pivots out of being the face. Like it feels like with the starting of this XFL, the Football League, that there is a transition coming. Like I remember, I think it was Mel Gibson when he started directing, he was like, oh, like you've only got really so long in front of the camera before people get sick of it. There's exceptions to the rule, obviously, Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, whatever. But I wonder if this would be the first indicator to him. It's like, oh, all right, well, maybe I put my interest in other places. I'll still do films from time to time, but maybe I'm just going to be a billionaire. I mean, I imagine owning an entire football league, if it is successful, can make you very rich.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe he'll. I don't think there's going to be someone in Hollywood saying like, "Oh, you're washed up, Rock. Your last movie only made $400 million or $500 million, or your superhero franchise bombed or what have you." I think it's just going to be on him. I think is he going to pull? It's not a financial thing. It's not even a looking at the Rotten Tomatoes scores thing or anything like that. I think it's just going to be up to him to decide whether he wants to. The fans he wants to retain are just the ones who don't want any surprises. They don't want anything new or interesting. Or if he can, or maybe he's underestimating his fans. Maybe he will just one day come to the realization, oh, I can do more. I can turn my charisma to a different project, and I think people will go with me. Maybe it's like a football team. Maybe they have a bad year, but there's a rebuilding process, and maybe he's gonna feel like, oh, well, now I've got to start at the bottom and rebuild, and I can have a more artistically satisfying career. A second one. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that concerns me is that like it's you don't get to that size at his age naturally, right? Like I'm assuming he's taking a fair number of supplements to maintain that. I did see like after that whole Liver King kind of expose, and I saw a bunch of different people. The focus then moved on to kind of like male body image and Hollywood and celebrities who always either claiming to be natural or just not talking about how they get this physique. But I did see one quote from The Rock where it was like, "What's your approach to fitness, or what's your what motivates you to stay fit?" And it was like longevity. Everything I've read about, and I'm not saying this is allegedly or I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, but everything I've read about things like HGH, steroids, all this kind of stuff is it dramatically limits your lifespan.
It seems that way.
It puts incredible pressure on your heart and strain on your body, and is not the key to longevity.
Yeah, I don't know anything about any of those supplements or really exercise of any kind, but I would just from a layman's perspective, I feel like veins, visible veins that are like the width of straws that are visible all the time on your body every moment of your waking life. It's probably a bad sign generally. I think however that is occurring is probably bad in the long term ultimately.
Look, I mean, I don't want this to be a rock trash, and I love Dwayne Johnson. And I'll tell like an anecdote. A friend of mine actually worked with him on one of his movies, and said that, and my friend only had like a small part, I think it was like 5 or 6 scenes, but said that generally on a big Hollywood film, you're shooting a 2-hander, you'll shoot the wide shot with both actors in the role, and then they'll shoot Tom Hanks. And then Tom Hanks will go home, and then a double will come in and stand there, and they'll shoot you close up, and you'll be acting with Tom Hanks' body double. That's just the kind of
and your friend is Tom Hanks.
Hey, my friend is Tom Hanks.
That's terrific.
So my friend was doing this scene with The Rock, and they shot the wide shot, and they shot The Rock's close-ups, and then my friend was expecting The Rock to go home, but The Rock was like, "Oh no, I'll do your off-camera dialogue." The camera movement and scene, so they had like a camera crane between them, and the camera sort of like would rise up and pivot around my friend as he's getting this like, having this exchange with The Rock. And he said it was so weird because he was doing his dialogue that he's looking at The Rock, and The Rock is scrambling around behind the camera, like stepping over chairs and moving assistant aside so he could maintain eye contact with my friend and just like do the generous actor thing and be present for the whole scene. He said, "You've never seen like a 6'4", like super muscular dude just like be so nimble, just moving around, just trying to just on a main eye contact at the end of the scene. And then like at the end of the scene came up and said to my friend, is that okay? Do you want to go again? Do you want me to do anything different? And he was like, you're The Rock. You don't have to check on me.
That's right.
You don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, ultimately I agree with that. I don't want to trash The Rock. He's done so many iconic movies that I really enjoy, that I would consider, genuine classics. It's just me. That's enough for me, I guess. If he continues to make, I quite like the Jumanji movies. If he continues to make, movies of a Black Adam quality or Red Notice, movies that just exist, and because he wants to please those fans, and those fans are happy, and they come out of the theater or switch off Netflix and they go, I love that. That's I guess that's his call. Of course it is. But if he could do one just for me, that would be, if he's listening.
I reckon you know what? You're joking, but I reckon that he may do something like that. Not just because of, not because of you, Maso, but like there might be like a Make-A-Wish kid or someone who's like, Rock, I've always wanted you to play He-Man or something like that. Right. And I reckon, what a great bit of publicity and potential hit property you got right there, it's got everything. It's got the human interest, it's got the fan service, there's potential box office. He's a smart operator. I could totally see him doing that. I just want to know where the rest of the stuff's going, like the non-movie star, like what, the political aspirations, the XFL. I mean, we are in, if you've ever spent any time in the States, especially in California, and you're driving around Los Angeles, obviously we don't have the level of celebrity here that they do over there. But it's not just the level of celebrity. They weaponize celebrity. Like every billboard, every bus poster is like a famous face selling you something. Listen to this radio show, watch this TV show, buy this wine, buy this tequila, whatever it is. Like, that's why, the idea of Trump becoming president is not a huge shock if you understand like that kind of Hollywood culture. Like Americans have been brought up worshipping heroes, and, they have a very successful entertainment industry, which creates legends. And there is one like right in front of us. Whether or not he actually takes the bait or lives up to the kind of what everyone's expecting of him, I guess remains to be seen. But I feel like I want to skip to the end of the book just to know how it ends.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, to see where this ends up. And look, and again, he's all about the fans. And as I understand it, because the XFL came around like many decades ago and it sort of crashed and burned, right? And he sort of brought it back. And that's, I think that, as I understand it, it's just because he saw these guys who, were good athletes and they needed the work and they couldn't get in the NFL. And so he's like, I'm going to do that for them. I've got the power to do it and I've got the money and I can push it with the celebrity. And he made that work. And, maybe he's like, I'm going to, if this works, what more can I do? And it's become the president. So... maybe that's it. Maybe, and who's gonna vote for him? The fans, which is everybody. So I'd vote for him.
I'll take out American citizenship just so I can vote for him.
Yes.
Yeah, just get Stone Cold Steve Austin as your running mate. VP Stone Cold.
Yeah.
Mate, so thank you so much for coming back on the show. It was quite a pleasure, large gap
Charlie.
between
what a bloody delight.
This appearance and your last appearance. Where can people listen to you and find you online?
Oh, well, I have a podcast called The Weekly Planet, which is it's all about movies and comic books and TV shows with a sort of very heavy emphasis on superhero stuff, your Black Adams and so forth, but also better movies. We love a bit of salacious Hollywood gossip about two huge bald men having a feud or whatever it is behind the scenes, and you want to see that on the screen. It feels good. Our mutual friend James, he has a YouTube channel, Mr. Sunday Movies. I'm often on that, and it's we have a wonderful time dissecting bad movies and so forth. Depending on when this comes out, we are currently talking about the more recent Fast and Furious movies. So people might want to check that out.
This is coming out on Friday, so it's very topical indeed.
Yeah, well, we'll be talking about sort of 5 to 7, which is where the franchise gets good again.
Link to the Weekly Planet in the episode description below. Maso, is it too cheesy if I sign off by saying rock on?
No, I love that. That's even better because we were talking about The Rock. I know that's your normal sign-off catchphrase anyway, but I love that.
Or you can rock off.
Rude.
listener.